All right, Brian, we are currently live.
All right.
Okay, great. And you have a man in a black shirt with a black dog.
Yes. That is Maggie, my dog, and this is her room. So I do my Zoom meetings in her room. She lets me come into her room and do my Zoom meetings.
Okay, well, it's nice that Maggie lets you in. So
That's right. That's right.
okay. And I guess hopefully there's an audience there, and just want to kind of get started. My name is Michael Dobson. I am president and founder of Dobson Craig and Associates. We're a governmental relations political consulting firm, and we provide association management, and we also oversee the Dream Foundation, which I'm here talking to a county commissioner candidate, Brian Welch, on behalf of the Dream Foundation. And the Dream Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit that operates throughout the state of Florida. We are the creators of the nation's first MLK specialty license tag, the Live the Dream tag. And because it focuses on the legacy of Dr. King, we also spend quite a bit of time throughout the state of Florida and in the legislature working on those issues that are core to Dr. King's legacy, issues regarding voting, criminal justice reform, issues to lift up small minority businesses, and a host of other issues ranging from healthcare, renewable energy, and others. And this election cycle, we've decided to engage ourselves in the political process a little by interviewing various candidates who we believe that are in key races that are going to impact the lives of so many people, those who are in lower wealth communities, and just people in general, to make sure that the representatives are actually representing people and not money. So I wanted to introduce Mr. Brian Welch, and Brian, if you can, give the audience a little information about yourself, your background, and et cetera. And then I'm going to ask some questions a little later, because this is such an important race. And I'll hand the mic over to you.
Well, thank you, Michael, so much. I appreciate it. I genuinely am thankful for the opportunity to speak with you and members of your organization. My name is Brian Welch, and I am a candidate for the Leon County Commission District 4 seat, which is located in Northeast Tallahassee, pretty much north of I-10 along Thomasville Road. Meridian Road is the western border of the district, and then Miccosukee Road and Mahan sort of make up I'm sorry, western is Meridian, eastern is Miccosukee and Mahan, all the way kind of up to Georgia on Miccosukee. So I have been a resident of Northeast Tallahassee since 1998. I moved here the day after I graduated high school. I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi. My goal in life as a young man was to be a Knoll. And fortunately, there wasn't a lot of opportunity to be a Seminole in Mississippi. So myself and my whole family, my mom and my stepdad and my little sister, we moved here the day after I graduated high school. My grandmother had lived here for a long time. She lived in Killearn at the time. And so we moved straight to Killearn in 1998. And shortly thereafter, I got a job at the Killearn Country Club. And a year after that, 1999, I met my wife, Kim, who was my girlfriend at the time at the Killearn Country Club. We met there in 1999 and would ultimately get married on the golf course in 2003. So I've done a lot of jobs at Killearn Country Club as a young man and have a real affinity for the community and Northeast Tallahassee. In that time, I've lived in Killearn Estates, as I mentioned. My wife and I lived in Killearn Acres for 10 years after we got married and had our 3 children. I have a 14-year-old named Chloe. She is a 9th grader at Childs. I have a 12-year-old named Cameron. She is a 7th grader at Montford. And I have an 8-year-old named Carter, who's a 3rd grader at Roberts Elementary. And so I've lived in Killearn Acres, Killearn Lakes, and now I live off North Centerville Road. So I've lived in Northeast Tallahassee for 23 years, except for maybe about a year or two while I was in college and went to FSU. I have a bachelor's degree from Florida State, as well as a master's degree in applied American politics and policy. Worked in politics a little bit early in my career and hated it, ironically. And then became a school teacher in 2007. So this is my 14th year in the classroom. I'm a high school teacher at Childs High School. I teach social studies, world history, and geography. Yep, 23 years, Northeast Tallahassee, high school social studies teacher. I actually got a second master's degree from the University of West Florida in 2016. So I have a master's degree in educational leadership. So I have two master's degrees. I got into this race in June of 2019. So been after it for about 15 months and talked about it for about 6 months before that. So this has been a 2-year process for me. We've had, a tremendous amount of success, and with 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks to go until Election Day, I think we have a really good opportunity to breathe a little bit of life, a little bit of energy into this Northeast Tallahassee District 4 County Commission seat, which hasn't seen any turnover in 14 years. The current county commissioner was elected in 2006 and has not had a challenger since that time. So I'm his first challenger. It's the first opportunity to have a referendum on his leadership. And I can tell you that I've got a lot of momentum. We have a lot of support. We've raised a pretty good chunk of money, and I'm real excited about the possibility of winning on November 3rd. So that's a little bit about me and my background. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to be here and glad to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks. Thanks so much, Brian. Something you said, I didn't know about your background in politics, and you said you hated it. Okay, so and I'm just kind of wondering, after not being engaged in politics, particularly running for office, before, and what really made you take on this crazy, interesting endeavor at this point in time?
Yeah, as a young man, I thought that I could have a career in politics, working on not necessarily as an elected official, but in the other side of it, right? Government affairs, lobbying, campaign stuff. And that stuff, the campaign stuff, I found more actually interesting than the lobbying side, the representing interest side. I just found it to be, a very selfish kind of business when you're chasing down legislators in the Capitol who only are interested in talking to you if you can do something for them. I found it to be extremely distasteful. And so I realized that, I got into politics because I thought, I'd have an opportunity to make a difference. And then I realized unless you're an elected official, you really don't have much opportunity to make a difference. You just kind of, you're trying to sway favor. And I didn't like that. And so I decided to do something with my life that was more service oriented. So I thought politics was going to be service oriented, but in the aspects that I was seeing it wasn't. So I decided to become a school teacher, and after working for 3 years in politics. I'd read somewhere that service jobs were the jobs where people had the most satisfaction: police officers and school teachers and firefighters, and because you're helping people every day and it makes you feel good to help people. And so I retrained myself and got certified as a teacher. I was actually a substitute teacher in college, so I was a little bit prepared for it. I had kind of flirted with the idea of becoming a teacher. And my first day, I've been at Childs the entire time. So my first day at Childs, I remember just being beside myself with excitement after the first day of school, because I thought, what a wonderful experience. What a great opportunity to impact lives. And really, I really do relish and appreciate the opportunity to impact young people's lives and interact with them all day long, and things like that. So yeah, I got out of politics, and then that same commitment to service has kind of brought me back into politics. So life has a funny way of working out like that. And so as a resident and a homeowner who's fully invested in Northeast Tallahassee financially, emotionally, socially, I saw some gaps in the coverage in our current representation. And I thought to myself, you know what? Why not sort of explore it. And like a lot of things, one conversation leads to 15 conversations, and before you know it, you're a candidate. And then, I was able to have some success. We raised $20,000 in the first month of my campaign from about 100 individual donors, which nobody was really expecting. And then we've been able to, parlay that into a successful month over month, just consistent reaching out to voters, campaigning, grinding, and we've been successful. And that momentum has just built over the course of 15, 16 months. And now we're right there. But I can tell you that campaigning has been, it's one of those things that people talk about. You hear them say it, it's a grind. I mean, it is a brutal grind. I've said this a couple of times in forums where, I see people who really enjoy campaigning. I see candidates who seem to be just woo, 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 woo. I question those people, because it is a tough gig, man. It is really hard to campaign in it. And that's the reason that nobody does it, frankly. That's why incumbents get reelected 3 times just by qualifying. It's hard to call people that and say, hey, can you donate $250 to me? I've jokingly said, if I sell some coffee for my daughter's cheerleader fundraiser, you get some coffee. If I sell some Girl Scout cookies, you get cookies. If I call you and say, hey, Michael, can I get $250 for my campaign? You're not going to get anything back from that. It's an investment in the broader sense, and so it's very difficult, but I'm glad it's almost over, and I'm looking forward to potentially the opportunity to then not parlay, but then sort of transition from asking people for their support to actually delivering for those same people, delivering public service. So interesting little transition for me in that regard, but I'm proud to be here and excited about the opportunity.
Okay, well, great. And I want to ask you, you've been out there on the campaign trail for some months now, and you've been talking to a lot of people, and we'll get to some of those big issues later on, and you might mention them in this question, by the way. And that is when you're talking to people, what are they telling you that they are concerned about, in this district and in this county, and what are they really looking for in their next commissioner for County Commission District 4?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm 41 years old. I'll be 42 and November 26th, so shortly after the election. So most of my peer group are young parents with families. I guess I'm not that young anymore, 42. I mean, but that 35 to 45 age group is kind of my age group. And then, so strangely enough, or interestingly enough, the first thing that kind of piqued my interest in sort of asking questions is the Northeast Park. Mr. Deloge, our current county commissioner, I remember when my daughter was born in 2006. She's the same age as his tenure. I remember him saying, we're going to get a park up in Northeast Tallahassee, like ball fields and concession stands. And it's just something we really, really need. Well, now, I've got a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And, they're kind of like in that prime age of using those athletic facilities. And then, you kind of just take your eye off the ball. You don't even pay attention to politics like most people do. And then you sort of one day you realize, well, we never got that park. And so that single issue really kind of drove me. Oh, sorry, hold on. Sorry, kids in the house.
Yeah, I remember those days.
So that one issue kind of drove me to pay attention to what was going on. And that issue is essentially recreational infrastructure in the Northeast. And so from there, it's just about paying attention. And when you start looking into it, you realize, well, you look at issues with development in Northeast Tallahassee, whether it be Summerbrook or Ox Bottom or the Welaunee Parkway extension into Killarn. Those are things that have all kind of been hot button issues over the past 3 to 5 years. And you start seeing some of the behaviors and actions associated with those issues. And it really concerned me. And so when you look at the bigger, broader issues, when I talk to people in Northeast Tallahassee, they're concerned about the same things that I am, which is lack of recreational infrastructure. You know, we don't have really good parks. We don't, well, we have good parks, but we don't have a really, we have no active park in Northeast Tallahassee. There is not a public ball field in District 4. Now, that didn't really occur to me until about 3 months ago, but there really is not. Okay. Meridian Park is not in District 4. Miccosukee Park is not in District 4. Now they're on the borders, but you know, Meridian Park is overflowing on weeknights. It is extremely overcrowded. It only has 2 baseball fields. It has 4 softball fields. You know, it's just not adequate. And so people that I know and I talk to are concerned about that. And then you start talking about, you know, development. Traffic in Northeast Tallahassee is extremely bad. In Thomasville Road is a mess. Bannerman Road is a mess. And then the big Welaunee Parkway and then the construction of Welaunee, all of those things really have people concerned, myself included. I really think of myself as a regular person. I'm just a regular Northeast Tallahassee resident. I'm not an insider. I don't run with all the good old boys. I'm just a family man who happens to have a lot of friends in Northeast Tallahassee and a pretty big network, and have worked in a school for 14 years and taught thousands of kids with thousands of parents. So I have a fairly good circle of resources and circle of acquaintances. And so I've been able to sort of do some informal polling and kind of determine, well, we really need new representation. And I think that's fair. You know, 14 years is a long time to be on the county commission, and certainly to not have a challenger. I think it's natural for anybody that does anything for 14 years to lose their focus, take their eye off the ball. And I think when you look specifically at our current county commissioner, I've said this repeatedly too, his tenure on the county commission has been clearly very good for him. He's been the chairman of the National Association of Counties and the State Association of Counties, and that's great. But I cannot tell you one single thing that has been benefited in District 4 by him getting those positions. And so I don't think that's unfair to say, Michael. I think that's totally fair. The proof is in the pudding. You know, Bannerman Road still needs to be widened. We still don't have active ball fields in Northeast Tallahassee. Traffic is still bad on Thomasville Road, yet we continue to see development after development after development where neighbors come out and say, what about us? We have some wishes. We want to make accommodations. We want some balance. And they're just told, well, you should have acted 2 years ago or a year ago or 6 months ago. We've had all these opportunities and you didn't take advantage of them. It is not a citizen's responsibility to reach out to their government. It's the government's responsibility to reach out to their citizens. If I'm the county commissioner for District 4 and we have controversial issues like zoning changes near Summerbrook and Bull Headley, I'm gonna go knock on the doors of the people in Summerbrook and say, you know, I want to make sure that you feel like you've been heard. I want to make sure that we accommodate you and that we provide a balance, you know, something to mitigate some of the impacts that we're going to have on you. Because I think it's a dereliction of a public elected official's duty to not do that. And I feel like the process that we use is almost intentionally obscure, you know, so we can just say, well, this is just the way it is. And you had opportunities, but you didn't know about it. Well, man, I'm living my life. I mean, I'm taking my kids to all across town actually to play baseball because we don't have anything close. I got cheerleaders and parent teacher conferences, you know, like everybody else. I'm living my life. The government has to do a better job of accommodating and taking. Currently just been kind of left to our own devices because it's the affluent part of town, and people, you know, people can afford their own swimming pools and people can drive their kids across town, and nobody really thought about the fact that we deserve those kinds of infrastructure improvements in Northeast Tallahassee just like everybody else. So sorry to be long-winded, but I think that when you pay 35% of the taxes in the county and you have 35% of the voters in the county, you dang sure ought to have an advocate in local government. And I just don't think that our District 4 County Commissioner is that right now, or has been for any recent amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, and you mentioned, I believe I heard you mention the, I think it's the Northern Gateway project called Welaunee. And I'm just curious where that is right now. And I know there's some controversy this past week, and I live in Killarney Estates, and we're not happy. And there's, people have different opinions as to how our association has reacted to that. And given the timeline of the election, and also the timelines in the process that's underway regarding that project, what is it that you think that you as a new commissioner could do with respect to that project to make it better, or to perhaps make it more in tune with what the voters are concerned about? And anyway, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things just right off the bat that we could do to improve that whole situation. Number one would be to stop, pause, right? There's been a lot of controversy and a lot of people's hackles have been raised over the fact that we're advancing comp plan amendments at this time. This is a project that's been going on for a long. This is a piece of land that we have known is going to be developed for 30 years, and the development piece will be another 30 years. I cannot tell you for the life of me why right now, in the midst of a once in a millennium pandemic, that we are moving such big comp plan amendments. Now, the excuse that we're given is that the family is trying to make some estate planning needs, the people that own the property. And I respect that. But public land use planning should not be done because it's convenient for a landowner who's trying to settle their estate issues. And so for me, I think the first thing we could do to get a better product, and this is the goal here, is the best product possible. So when we're talking about Welch, a 5,000 acre piece of property within the city limits, where we're now going to expand the urban services area, I'm not against those amendments, those comp plan amendments on their face. I think they're probably sensible. Now, whether or not we should spend $100 million building a road into a 5,000 acre piece of property and then building spur roads into established 5,000 home communities, I think that's quite, you can have a debate on that, right? But you can't, and you shouldn't, at a time when people can't offer meaningful public input. And so I think number one, you could just pause Welch and say, we're going to wait a year. We might wait 2 years. There is no rush. Everybody acknowledges we're not going to be building a house in Welch for 10 years, right? So why are we in a hurry? And the excuse we get is because what's been going on a long time. How do we create a sense of urgency over something that's been going on a long time and we acknowledge is going to go on for a much longer time? I think it's insulting to the intelligence of regular people who go, wait a minute. And then if you look at the process that was involved in that, where the county commission agreed to pause. I don't know if you remember that about 2 months ago, the county commission said, we're not going to move forward on this. It's not the right timing. And the city was like, well, we're going to move forward with it. And then the chairman, who is my opponent, made a motion that was later deemed improper at the end of a meeting in his personal time, surprising the rest of the commissioners to say, oh, we're going to go ahead and move this amendment. And we're going to move this motion to proceed with the process of transmitting the comp plans. And I think that's highly suspect. I mean, Commissioner Proctor in that meeting at that time said, this is the kind of thing that gets the FBI knocking on your door. Now, I don't disagree with that. It's just highly suspicious, the process by which we're doing this. So number one, we could have just eliminated all doubt. And I'm not saying that it is nefarious. I'm just saying perception is reality and it looks suspicious. And we could have avoided all of that, any perception of impropriety by just stopping, right? There's no rush on Welch. No one's told us why there's a rush. No one can explain why it's being rushed or why it's being done. Number two, Keep It Rural is an organization of folks who live out here where I live on North Centerville Road. They proposed, Dr. Pam Hall is one of those people involved in that group. You may know her. They proposed a phenomenal greenways master plan for the Welch property with parks, set aside 40% of the property, expand the buffers along Centerville and Mississippi Road to like 300 feet, laid out like 60 acres for the Northeast Park that I always talk about, I mean, it was a really, really good plan. And the county, the blueprint could have just adopted that plan, and it would have been a huge step in the right direction. But on Tuesday night, they did not adopt that plan. And then the thing that got Killearn Estates really mad was they've now raised the potential density to 12,000 homes, all right, potentially. So it was initially like 4,500. Now it's 12,000 potential homes in the Weelaunee property. And so Killearn Estates asked for a stop clause, which is, my understanding is essentially before they upzone it or allow for a density of 12,000 homes, they have to provide a traffic study that would justify that. In other words, the people in Killearn are worried about traffic, and I think rightfully so. You know, people make the argument, like we were talking about earlier on Facebook, somebody's making the argument, well, why would we be concerned about that? It's not even an issue. Well, they're neglecting to acknowledge that when you add another potentially 12,000 homes right there, you know, on that east side of Centerville Road, that's a lot of traffic. You know, you're talking about 7 to 10 to 15,000 new cars that we're injecting into this geographic area. That is a big concern and a fair concern for people who live in Killearn Estates. If you live along Shamrock East, you have a very fair gripe. And so that is what kind of pushed them over the edge and sent them, I assume, sent them into this, to send that letter out this week. So, you know, I think that Weelaunee is a once in a generation type of land use development, and it's gonna reshape Tallahassee forever. It's bigger than Killearn Estates. It's bigger than Southwood. It's a humongous piece of property, and it's going to be like a whole new little town right there. And so if you live on Centerville Road and you live in Killearn Estates, or you live, you know, especially down at South Centerville Road, there are a lot of concerns, and they're not unwarranted concerns, and they're not unfixable concerns. We just need to bring these people to the table and address their issues. And I think people get frustrated when that doesn't happen. They're just dismissed. They're told, hey, it's not a problem. We tried to engage with you 5 years ago and you didn't engage. These were blueprint projects and you voted on them. People had no idea what was in those blueprint projects when they voted on that amendment to expand that penny sales tax. So I think that the concerns are fair. And then, you know, the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. And right now, the southern portion of Weelaunee is being developed, and it's called Canopy, right? It's down there by Lowe's and Capitol Circle. And if you look at that development, which is about 500 acres, so literally about 10% of the total rest of it, they cut down every tree on the property, literally cut down all but like 2 trees on 500 acres and started building houses slapped next to each other. And then created a huge runoff problem when we had big rains in the spring, and they ended up overflowing the holding pond that they had built and got fined $200,000 from the state. After the county and the city and the county fined them like $10,000, the water management district came in and said, oh, no, you caused a lot more damage. You need, you know, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. And so I think if you live in Stonegate, or you live in Centerville Trace, or you live in Buckhead, you know, down near the interstate, you have real right to be angry about how we're ramming Weelaunee through the planning process. And so, so I think there's a lot that could be done with Weelaunee. If I were in charge, I would not, if I were the county commissioner, I would not have voted to transmit the comp plan amendments based just on process. And I would have adopted the Keep It Rural plan as it were designed. And I would, you know, I would have approved or tried to move Killearn's stop clause that they wanted. I mean, those are just 3 issues where your District 4 county commissioner, I don't understand why you wouldn't vote with your neighborhoods on those issues. I mean, you may lose. I mean, you're only 1 vote and you may lose, but man, in principle, you should vote with your neighborhoods, right? Just so you can say, hey, I am representing your interest, not a developer's interest, not a real estate interest, not a landowner's interest. I'm serving your interest because I'm a purist when it comes to public service. And this is what drove me out of politics as a young man. I see so much selfishness in it, right? It's all about self-service. It's all about advancing an agenda or playing some kind of game. Man, my only job as a county commissioner is to represent the interest of the people who vote for me. I am a public servant, and that is the only interest that I should serve, is the public's interest. And I think that there are things that are happening with Wallonia that don't necessarily serve the broader public interest.
I'm gonna ask you now. Theoretically, after November 3rd, the makeup of this county commission could be different, and there are going to be obviously some different views on this. Will that new commission be in a good place to make any real substantive differences in terms of where this project goes and where the trajectory of it goes?
I think so. I do think so. I think that if I were to win, it would fundamentally change the face of the county commission. You're talking about somebody that's been there 14 years. I mean, that's a decade and a half, man. That's a long time. So you'd have a new person in that seat. I think that I better reflect the community now. I better reflect the issue positions that the community wants. And I think we forget the District 4 county commissioner, the other commissioners look to that position to kind of lead on issues that affect that community, right? And so it's very easy. For instance, when they rezoned the area around Summerbrook, Commissioner Deloge made the first motion to approve the zoning change. And that was right after the residents of Summerbrook had come in numbers to the meeting and said, we don't want this, we don't like this, we want to work with the developer. And Mr. Deloge makes a motion to move it, to approve it. Well, what does that say to the other 6 county commissioners? Well, these are his people. This is who votes for him. If he's this confident in making the motion, I'll just fall in line, right? I mean, if I'm a county commissioner and Kristen Dozier is the county commissioner for District 5, which is the neighborhood over for me, I'm certainly going to defer to her on issues that affect Falls Chase, right? That area over there next to Costco, the big developments that are going in, I'm going to defer to Commissioner Dozier on that because those are her people. That's who she is elected by, and that's all she's elected by. So, I think that at least my understanding is or way it should be, that's how the dynamic is set. And so I think when Commissioner Deloge repeatedly takes positions against the residents that he serves, it just makes it easy for the rest of the commissioners to just fall in line and go, oh, they're basically taking cover behind him on controversial issues, which, who knows how those votes would change if Mr. Deloge's vote changed, right? So the other night at the Blueprint meeting, that was a 10-2 vote to advance the comp plan amendments, or to move it as it were. Mr. Deloge was one of those 10. If Mr. Deloge had joined the other 2, I bet you it wouldn't have been 9-3. It may have been 7-5, or it may have been 6-6, because when the guy who represents the neighborhood, takes a alternative position, it allows multiple other people to fall into that position. So to me, that's just the nature of human behavior. And I know it just greatly disappoints the neighbors and the communities when they see their county commissioner do that,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, there's another hot button issue, which is kind of interesting to me, because at the end of the day, what it is a ballot initiative. And that's the children's services issue. And that issue obviously will be something that the citizens will decide on. It's not necessarily something that's on the agenda for the commission itself to deal with, although the commission worked to make it a ballot initiative. But I think that citizens do want to have some sense of your view on that issue, because depending on how you feel about the various things that people either love about it or they think that are problematic about it, if it's approved, you'll have some opportunity to improve that that whole council, or you'll be in a position to improve upon that. What are the things that you see needs to be improved about it? Any concerns that you have, or what's your view on that issue?
So I support the Children's Services Council in principle. I've read the white paper and done my research on it. I think that the concerns that are being raised are completely fair. Yeah, I think they're fair. I think they're convincing. I think they're reasonable. But at the end of the day, it's a ballot referendum. If I were having to decide on it, I would probably be much less confident in my decision. But it's a ballot referendum. There's nothing more democratic than allowing people to vote on an issue, and it'll rise or fall on its merits and how people receive it. For me personally, I will vote for it, but I share the concerns of the people who have concerns. I think those are valid concerns. I think the positives outweigh the negatives. I think that if it's done correctly, a dedicated pot of money targeted at children's services issues in the community could have a big impact on issues across our community, whether we're talking about poverty, whether we're talking about crime, educational segregation, economic segregation. If we really had a dedicated pot of money that we could target specifically at various issues within those broader community problems, you should, in theory, have a good outcome or an improved outcome. So I support the Children's Services Council. I think it's a good idea. I understand that people think it's an unaccounted for pot of money with no elected accountability, but the reality is the superintendent of schools will be on the Children's Services Council, a school board member, a county commissioner, a city commissioner. There will be elected officials on this council. And if it turns out to be a humongous mess, then people can take that out on elected officials. So I think it's a little disingenuous to suggest there's no accountability. I think the superintendent of schools who deals with children's issues will be super sensitive to make sure that there's success with the Children's Services Council money, because they could be school board members same way. I mean, they could be held, they could sort of almost unfairly be held accountable by failures within the Children's Services Council. So I think there will be accountability, but I do appreciate people's concerns. It is a tax, and this is not a serendipitous moment to be raising taxes with the economic dilemma that we're in. And so, if I were to vote against the Children's Services Council, that would be the main reason, is because we should not be raising taxes right now. I think it's fair to say that we should be able to find $8 million within the existing budget to specifically target children's services. But the way that these are designed statutorily provides for an uninterrupted flow of money directly to those kinds of issues, whereas within the county budget or the city budget now, nonprofits have to fight for that funding every year. And so I think that it will have good, I just think the positives outweigh the negatives. I think the potential success is worth the risk. So I think the reward is worth the risk, but I acknowledge there is risk. I mean, if you look at Blueprint, which is a similar type of situation, but just much bigger, there's controversy about how Blueprint dollars are spent. We now have economic development money within Blueprint, hundreds of millions of dollars, where elected officials can now bond money, expecting future revenue from sales tax extensions. And when we bond money, that costs us money, right? We have to pay interest on that money. So I think all of those are very valid concerns, but I trust the voting public. I mean, there's just nothing more democratic than a ballot referendum. So that's kind of my position on it. I can see both sides, and I think that's perfect because people get to make the decision for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you so much. And I think when you and I was talking, I think it was yesterday, and I was sharing with you. While I'm asking you questions, and my opinion probably don't matter that much, but I think it's wonderful. I think that it's that council, if done right, it's number one, I think it's needed. And I think if done right, it's a tool that could create some equality for all of our children around the county. And, because in a lot of cases, kids, when they get home from the hospital after birth, things aren't always equal, depending on the resources and a lot of other things that are just a part of just our society, some of the darker parts of our society. And I think what this council can do is to try to take care of some of those gaps that exist in services, and those gaps that exist that interfere with the opportunities that really bright kids can have, and people and kids can have in their lives, so that everybody really does have the same chance to succeed in America. But those two issues regarding the Children's Service Council and Welch, those are the things that people talk about, quite a bit. Now, I would gamble to say that those issues kind of sucks all the oxygen out of the room sometimes. So if you can tell me, again, when you're out there talking to people, and what are some of the other issues that we're really not talking about?
Well, in Northeast Tallahassee, most of my issue positions are kind of central to Northeast Tallahassee. So when you talk about development, you talk about traffic and infrastructure needs, and then the Children's Services Council is obviously a big issue. I think that crime in our broader community is a big issue, and then specifically folks in Northeast Tallahassee really don't consider it a problem in the sense that it's not really located in our community. But I think what we need to understand is things like the Children's Services Council can have impacts on reducing crime. And if we just turn a blind eye to crime in our county, ultimately it's going to creep its way to our community. It's going to creep its way north of I-10. And so, I think crime is an issue. I think poverty in the 32304 is a big issue for the county as a whole. That we're kind of, again, the Children's Services Council is kind of stealing the conversation away from social issues like poverty and like crime. And so I think that, Northeast Tallahassee really is a part of the fabric, is what I say, of the whole county. And because we're kind of left on our own up here and kind of forgotten about within local government, people out here are just very disconnected from that. So I think that the county the District 4 County Commissioner, you represent the District 4, about 70% is in the city and about 30% is not. I don't live in the city. So where I'm at, Commissioner Deloge is my only touch point to local government. I don't have a city commissioner. The at-large county commissioners don't really represent my community. They don't live in my community. And so, somebody needs to bring District 4 to the table. I mean, obviously there's a lot of resources in District 4 monetarily. I think I forget where I saw this, but I feel like I've seen something that said a pretty substantial percentage of local nonprofit revenue or donations comes from District 4, which makes sense because we are that most affluent part of town. Mm-hmm. And so I think that somebody needs to bring District 4 to the table and say, hey, these are problems in our entire community. Maybe some of you folks could drive around in 32304 and see some of the poverty that goes on down there. And I think it would change your perspective, because we tend to be a little insular. We tend to stay in our little bubbles of, and in this case, the bubbles of affluence. And so I think that the sort of dereliction of duty in terms of representing and advocating for District 4 has two sides to it. And the flip side of it is District 4 doesn't really engage in larger community issues and try to find solutions. So, that's one example. And I mean, there's tons of tiny little examples of issues. I mean, everybody has some kind of issue, right? I mean, we have folks out here in North Centerville Road have issues with broadband access. We, don't have very dependable internet services and things like that. So, there's a lot of issues that are small, but, I think that's no different than anywhere else.
Yeah. And thank you so much. I'm about to run out of time, and and there's a lot of things that I wanted to talk about, but I'll just end on this one item. And I was talking with a buddy of mine before we got on the phone. He and I have been involved in political campaigns around the state and in Tallahassee over over the last quarter of a century, I guess. And we were talking about this particular district you're running in. You had Bruce Host that held that seat for quite some time, and you got Brian and I think maybe even I think was may have been Tony Grippa. So this seat was one of those seats that was kind of considered a Republican seat. And I know it's we try to talk nonpartisan and et cetera. And I'm just curious. I mean, it looks like some things are changing in that seat. Not necessarily, I wouldn't say D versus R or anything, but it looks like the citizens are looking for something different. And what say you to them to close this out?
Well, it's a nonpartisan seat, as all local government positions are. And I think that's appropriate, because listen, Republicans need ball fields just like Democrats do in Northeast Tallahassee. Republicans sit in the same traffic as Democrats do in Northeast Tallahassee. Republicans are as frustrated with their lack of advocacy as Democrats are. And so for me, the truth is demographically, this district is about evenly split. It's about 20,000 Democrats, 20,000 Republicans, and 10,000 NPAs. And so even though it barely shades Republican by like 1,000 voters, but then you have 10,000 NPAs, which, I would suggest the majority of them are probably Democrats just because of the nature of the county. So, I don't think it's even a partisan thing. I think Mr. Grippa was a Republican and Mr. Deloge was a Republican, and I'm not sure what Mr. Host was. He may also have been a Republican.
Yeah,
yeah, I think that, again, I think advocacy sees no partisanship. Ideology is kind of thrown out the window when you're talking about local issues. Big ideological partisan issues aren't something that's going to be impacted by the county commission. And so I don't think people looked at Mr. Deloge and said, oh, he's a Republican, I'm going to vote for him. I can tell you that about 70% of my donors are Republicans, and I'm a Democrat. So I don't think it's a partisan thing. I consider myself a moderate pragmatist, a reasonable person. And I would venture to say that Mr. Deloge is probably the same way. I don't think he says he's a conservative, but I don't think he's a conservative. I think he's a moderate. He's as moderate as they come, to be honest with you. But he's not doing the job. And so I think if you're a Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. I have a lot of Republican support. And I have a lot of Democrat support, and I have a lot of NPA support. So I think local issues kind of transcend partisanship. And so I don't necessarily think District 4 is shifting or changing or going through an evolution. I just think it's 14 years is 14 years. I mean, that's my ninth grade daughter's lifetime. So I think it just naturally needs change. And I think if there's anything that can unite folks across political spectrums, it's the need for effective advocacy at the local level. And so I'd like to think that I'm giving those folks an opportunity. I mean, there has never been a name on the ballot next to Mr. Deloge since 2006. Mm-hmm. He has only won one election, and he served for 14 years. Now, if I were to say, hey, we're going to elect our politicians to 14-year terms, you would probably say there is no way you would ever get that approved. And so I think if I win this election, I think that's an example of the voters saying, we don't want 14-year term limits, right? We want people that are going to be passionate and energetic advocates for the issues that concern us, the issues that are at our fingertips. And that's what I'm offering to folks that I feel like we don't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that seat and the things you're talking about just kind of bring back a lot of thoughts, particularly the issue regarding it being local, because the infamous Tip O'Neill, as he said, all politics is local.
That's right.
And while a lot of us are going to be focusing on the top of the ticket, the races that's going to impact us more directly is going to be your race. And probably the judicial races, that's going to be on the ballot, and obviously those ballot initiatives. And Brian, I want to wish you luck. And I think I can say I support you. I think you do a wonderful job, and I want, if you can tell the audience, how can they get in contact with you and be supported?
Well, first, let me say thank you, Michael. I mean, that means a lot to me. I sincerely appreciate your support. It's every time somebody tells me that, it's a humbling and kind of overwhelming thing, a notion, that people would support you. It's when you put yourself out there and you ask people to put their trust in you, a sacred trust, that public trust. It's kind of like being a school teacher, actually. So in that sense, I want to say thank you. It means the world to me. I would tell folks out there in your audience, if they want to learn more about our campaign, they can go to welchforleon.com. That's WELCHFORLEON.com. We have some videos out. We have a pretty strong Facebook page. We have about 1,400 likes on our Facebook page. So follow along there. That's going to be the most, the least static of our pages. It'll be updated. I'm doing truck talks where I drive around and talk in my truck while I cruise around the district. So, and certainly, we're going to be out fundraised, by about 4-1. And unfortunately, there's some political committee money that's coming into this race, which is really tilting the balance in terms of the fundraising. So if anybody would like to contribute to our campaign, $5, $10, $15, $20, we only have 2 weeks left to fundraise. 2 weeks from yesterday is the deadline for fundraising. We've got over 500 individual donors at this point. So I would really appreciate any contributions anybody could spare if they got it in their budget. Also, we have some yard signs. We have opportunities to wave yard signs. We have opportunities to make phone calls. So we have opportunities to volunteer, and you can find all that information at welchforleon.com. I would welcome your support. If you can't do anything else, the most important thing that you can do is bubble in BRIANWELCH on November 3rd if you live in Northeast Tallahassee. If you don't, I'd appreciate your prayers and your thoughts. But other than that, thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you and to your audience, and I would certainly appreciate your support.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian, and I know that campaigning consumes your life. Once you take it, and I'm sure you wake up every morning, your wife's like saying, "When are we going to talk about something else?" I mean,
there's no doubt. My wife is my greatest blessing, Michael. I mean, I couldn't do this without her. She is my, she is the everything, the wind beneath my wings, to borrow a cheesy song. I mean, you've been around campaigns. I'm sure you can't do this without the support of your family. And right. They are paying the price. I mean, we're all sacrificing. I missed my son's first ball game last night because I was on 2 Zoom calls, and my daughter's at a cheerleader at Childs, and so she has a game tonight. So I'm missing that. So it's it's a family sacrifice, but my wife is super supportive and believes in me and trusts me like a lot of people have and a lot of people do. And so it's a humbling experience, and I certainly would be honored and privileged to actually be able to be the county commissioner for District 4 and really try and have an impact on people's lives. Okay.
And again, thank you so much, Brian, and blessings to you. And I'm sure I'll talk to you again and have a great rest of your day and weekend, but I know it's going to be full with campaigning, I'm sure.
No doubt. Well, thanks again, Michael. Call me anytime, man. I appreciate you very much. All right. Bye-bye.